Well, sustainability is a concept which has been quite difficult to define, but I think what you've got to look at it as is being able to produce what we need to produce, not just next year and the year after, or even decade after decade, but generation after generation. So we know enough about agricultural systems. We can produce what we need to produce to feed the people that we need to produce, but know that we can do it predictably over and over again into the future. So if you look at the past, before we used fossil fuels for powering vehicles or making fertilizer, agriculture was essentially based on human power, draft animals, wind for milling or water, but the yields were probably no greater than in Roman times. So maybe in the case of wheat, maybe 1.5 tons per hectare. And it used huge numbers of people to harvest even quite small areas. Now, of course, we can produce 10, 12 tons per hectare, but of course we use a lot of fossil fuels. But in the past, people starved. It was unpredictable. Now, of course, we still have 1 billion hungry people in the world, but we're feeding 8 billion people. And what we've got to now think about is how we are going to continue to produce the food that we need, looking into the future, but at the same time ensuring that this is done in a sustainable way, which means that we are not removing forest, we're not removing permanent grassland, and we are actually able to think about not just this generation, but generations to come, and know that they will also be fed and have a good, nutritious and fulfilled life. I think one of the things that I was saying is that we've got to think about this concept of sustainable intensification, and that means producing what we need to produce on the smallest footprint of land because of the fact that we need land for other purposes. Now, that brings into play a range of technologies, of which genetic improvement, the way in which we increase the genetic potential of crops, and there are lots of technologies which allow us to do that, increasingly sophisticated technologies, of which GM has been one and will continue to be one. It isn't a magic bullet, but it will contribute to our ability to produce more on the footprint of land in order to increase the sustainability of production. Now, of course, organic, many important things in organic production, particularly, for example, the care of the quality of the soil, the productivity of the soil, the recycling of nutrients. So really what we're saying is it's not an either-or situation. It's a both-and situation. Nothing should be ruled in and nothing should be ruled out. It's the outcomes that are important, and the outcomes are high levels of productivity on small, reducing areas of land in order to preserve and spare land for other purposes, including the capturing of carbon, the looking after of biodiversity, the quality of water, and possibly even the need to produce energy from land as well. I think it's the responsibility of everybody to think about the management of land as an ecosystem. Of course, farmers have the primary purpose of agriculture is to convert solar energy into chemical energy, food, and other things which we need in order for us to live. That's the primary function of agriculture. But if that's done efficiently, which of course we hope that it will be, then of course it leaves land for other purposes. And those other purposes are, as I've described, looking after water, the ability to capture carbon and look after biodiversity. We all have a responsibility to actually think about those issues and to actually empower farmers to do their job well in terms of the positions that they hold in society, and to develop the political and you might say the economic circumstances that these things can occur. So the key issue really is to say, my hypothesis would be, thinking about the sustainable intensification, is that to produce the food that we need, which the market requires, not to overproduce, but that the market requires, or if you're in the developing world, to produce the food that your family requires, on the smallest area of land, is actually the greenest way to farm. because of the reason that you are not putting more resource in than you need, so it's resource efficient, and it also leaves land available for other purposes which are equally as important, or at least have importance. But the most important thing is not to confound the two things. A lot of people have got confounded by the need to, if you might say, think of farmland as being a source of biodiversity and other things. But actually, food production and production from land is important, but to do it efficiently leaves options for efficient use of land for things like conservation and other purposes. I think that but basically in this part of the world, it's already extremely productive. Quite clearly, there are some problems, and those problems are being dealt with well. But if you look at the way in which climate is going to change, temperatures are going to elevate, growing seasons are going to increase. This is really a part of the world that not only has the opportunity to increase production, but actually probably has an obligation to increase productivity. This is a place where actually crops can be produced more readily and easier than anywhere else, perhaps. And this is something where really Ireland cannot fail.